Hello everyone, it's that time of year again. Breeders' Cup weekend is fast approaching and we're looking ahead to the action from Keeneland this year. Over the next 10 minutes or so we're going to be previewing plenty of the key races, hopefully identifying one or two winners along the way, and in a bid to do precisely that, alongside me, Matt Brocklebank, we have Mark Milligan. Mark, welcome to the Sporting Lifetime Form Breeders' Cup coverage. Mark, you were Timeform's international analyst, American expert for several years before just handing over the baton to Jake Price earlier this year. Mark, just give us a brief snapshot, if you would, your thoughts going into this year's meeting, whether the strength of the home team is as high as it has been in the past, and just a word on this Team Europe on the whole.
Yeah, I think on balance, certainly on dirt, you would say that the US team are as strong as they've ever been. There's some real stars, in fact superstars, who we're going to see across the weekend, the likes of Jackie's Warrior, Jack Christopher, Nest, who's been absolutely superb this season, and of course Flightline, who's the horse with the highest ever Timeform rating since we started collating North American figures quite a few years ago. His Del Mar Pacific Classic performance was just sensational, and I think Team Europe, as ever, will hold a strong hand in the turf races. I think they won 4 the last time that the Breeders' Cup was at Keeneland. I expect they'll hit a similar number this time around.
Yeah, obviously in America they crescendo through the weekend and build up towards the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're going to dive straight into the big one here, the big 10 furlong race on the dirt on Saturday night. And as you touched on there, Flightline, he isn't just favourite for this race, is he? A lot of the American handicappers are essentially saying he's past the post already. He won that Pacific Classic doing handsprings. I'm guessing he's been quite a hard horse for you to put a rating on at Timeform.
Yeah, he's certainly, until that Pacific Classic romp, he was tricky, because he was winning every race basically by double digits without ever really being asked. I mean, if you just look at his resume, he's unbeaten in 5, and he's won those 5 races by 13 1/4 lengths, 12 3/4 lengths, 11 1/2 lengths, 6 lengths, and then 19 1/4 lengths in the Pacific Classic at Del Mar. And that was just, in all my time watching horse racing, and I go back a number of years now, that was the most sensational performance I think I've ever seen, certainly on an American racetrack. In Europe, we've got Frankel as the comparison. What Frankel did on turf was just astronomical. It had never been seen before and probably won't be seen again. And Flightline is in a very similar category on dirt.
Mark, he's high on the Timeform ratings. Now, I get the impression you suspect he might be able to nudge even higher, because there's a fascinating dynamic to this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. Just map that out for us, if you would.
Yeah, there is. Now, let's go back and look at his Pacific Classic, and what he did there by winning 19 1/4 lengths was sensational. In second place was Country Grammar, who himself had won the Dubai World Cup in March, and he was 7 lengths clear of the third. And Flightline got 143 rating there, which for context is only £4 shy of the best ever rating that Frankel achieved. Interestingly, in that Pacific Classic, Country Grammar was probably about the best of them, and he'd finished ahead of Life is Good in the Dubai World Cup. Now, I'm not convinced Life is Good was at his best that day. The track was quite deep and tiring. He was kept quite wide as well by Irad Ortiz, so he wasn't at his best there. In all of the circumstances, Life is Good has been sensational, and I don't think it's putting too fine a point on it to say Flightline wasn't here. Life is Good would be an odds-on favourite for this himself, and he's a horse as good as, if not better than, anything Flightline has ever faced before. And the interesting dynamic is that he's a dyed-in-the-wool front runner. Team Pletcher have made no bones about what they're going to do. They're going to go out in front and basically try to break Flightline from the front. Now that gives Flavien Prat a bit of a problem, because Flightline himself is really speedy, and he won't be far off Life is Good. But does Flavien Prat commit and try and take on Life is Good, potentially then compromising his own chance? Or does he sit off him, at which point he's giving a 131 time form rated opponent a freebie on the front end? It's a fascinating dynamic, it really is.
I suspect you do think Flightline is going to emerge on top here and win quite well. Are you looking, is it even a race for a bet? Are you looking to cash a ticket, to coin a phrase?
I'd probably, I think Flightline will win. I think he'll win well. The majority of people, if they're wanting to play this race from a betting angle, may be looking at something from an each way perspective or an exacta, something to finish second to Flightline. Yeah. The obvious one that people are going to home in on is Life is Good, because he's the second best horse in the race and he's essentially a fair way clear of the rest of the opponents. But my thinking is, if he tries to break Flightline, he could break himself and essentially finish out of the top three. So if I was playing this, I haven't fully decided on a strategy yet, but I'd be looking for something just coming from a bit deeper.
Pick up the pieces.
Yeah, potentially to finish second to Flightline. Something ridden really chilly, really. Actually, I think the majority of the trainers and jockeys in this race will go into it thinking, we can't beat Flightline, let's just try and get second or third. And it could well set up for something ridden like the likes of Epicenter, ridden a bit more cold.
Fascinating race. Obviously, let's switch over to the green stuff now and the Breeders' Cup Turf on Saturday. Charlie Appleby's record at the Breeders' Cup is absolutely sensational. I think it's 6 winners from 11 starters. Now he's got 2 in here, Rebels Romance and Nation's Pride. For me, I really like the look of the latter. Nation's Pride, fresh off the Jockey Club Derby Invitational win. That was in September. Which do you think is going to be best suited to this test? Yeah,
I'm with you. I think Nation's Pride I think he's just a better conveyance around these sharper American turf tracks than Rebels. Rebels Romance, he's a big horse. He takes a while to get organised. Of course, he started his career on dirt, really. They didn't even think he was a turf horse. He's come into his own over 1.5 miles on turf on his last few starts, but he's a real grinder, and I'm not sure this track's going to play to his strengths. Nation's Pride, he's run his last 3 races in America, and interestingly, they've kept him out there. He hasn't come home. He's been trained out there since he won the Jockey Club Derby Invitational at Belmont in September.
We've seen that work before, haven't we, with the likes of Waheda and 1 or 2 others for Charlie Appleby. Just in the home team in the turf, there's a mare, isn't there? Bill Mott's mare, Warlike Goddess. Has she got a squeak?
Yeah, Warlike Goddess, the jockey killer, I like to call her, because she's
terrifying.
She's a sensational mare, but if you do something wrong on her, you're going to pay the price. Now, she should have won the filly and mare turf last year. She ended up being beaten half a length, having been best part of 10-11 lengths off the pace. Julian Leperoux got the elbow off her for that ride. Joel Rosario took over. He won twice on her. He then gave her, I say, an interesting ride in the Flower Bowl 2 starts ago. She was beating her neck. Again, she should have won. Rosario got the elbow. Jose Lezcano was on her for a Grade 1 Turf Classic win last time. He'll probably be desperate not to ride a bad race this time around, as he might not get to ride her again. But she's very, very good. She should be unbeaten in her last sort of 9-10 starts. She should have won those 2. And Rosario and Leperoux both paid the price for not winning on her.
Okay, let's stick with Appleby though, into the Breeders' Cup Mile. Modern Games, watching him win the Juvenile Turf last year was just a very weird experience entirely, given that he was kind of scratched but allowed to run for a purse. He ran in the QE2 at Ascot on Champions Day. Was that a mistake, do you think?
He ran there because of Charlie Appleby trying to win the Trainers' Championship, didn't he? And I think it was a bit of an afterthought.
Winning your in race as well for this, wasn't
it? But he was already in, courtesy of his Woodbine Mile win, so that wouldn't have been a consideration for me. I think he was running there purely to try and seal the Trainers' Championship for Charlie Appleby. I would have preferred to see him come here a little bit fresher, having a hardish race at Ascot on soft ground just a couple of weeks ago probably isn't the ideal prep, but we know he's proven under North American conditions. He won at the Breeders' Cup last year. He's won at Woodbine. Bayside Boy, who beat him at Ascot last time, was in this race but has been taken out. So that's one of his major opponents gone.
Is there a home hope here you like, or is this going to the Euros?
Now, I think as long as the Euros fare well with the draw, which can be tricky at Keeneland. If you look at the configuration of the Keeneland turf track, the mile start is not far from the first turn. If you're drawn 13 or 14, can be very, very tricky to overcome. But I don't think the home team are that good. Annapolis would probably just about be the pick of them for me. He was a progressive 3-year-old, but with the likes of Modern Games, Kinross, even Pogo to a certain extent, an Order of Australia. If they fare well with the draw, I think the Euros will come out on top here.
Okay, let's talk Golden Pal. I know he's a home hope that you're really quite sweet on. He hasn't really won over the Brits, has he? Because he kind of keeps coming over here and he does seem to get turned over, but he is a bit of a legend. And maybe more importantly, he's a bit of a Keeneland legend, isn't he? Yeah,
he's sensational for me. It would be wrong for people who've only seen his 2 European starts, 3, because he ran at Royal Ascot as a 2-year-old, anyway, when he probably should have won there.
Learjet nabbed him, didn't he?
Yeah. York was he just didn't turn up for whatever reason that day. And I'm always willing to forgive a horse a bad run at York, because sometimes that turf track, horses just don't handle it for whatever reason. And look, Irad Ortiz is not going to look back with any fondness on the King's Stand, is he? Royal Ascot, when he was essentially looking behind him when the gates opened and the race was over at the start. Look, he'll ping the gates here. He'll fly out of the stalls, and I don't think he'll be headed. I think he'll be a couple of lengths. Highfield Princess, she's really, really quick, isn't she? I don't think she'll be as quick as Golden Pal. Golden Pal is on home turf. He literally won this race last year at Del Mar, which we're seeing on the screen now. He had it won 100 yards out of the gates, didn't he? And he's just a sensational horse in his own backyard, and he's the best bet of the weekend for me.
Now, we sent Ben Linfoot up to Highfield Princess's backyard to see John Quinn just the other week, and he thought she was really holding her condition well. She goes into it on the back of another break, because obviously she had a break, didn't she, before she went to France, and it was probably even better again when winning the Flying 5. This is a really, really good European-American clash, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Highfield Princess, she's a proper speedster herself, isn't she? She's done nothing but progress. She's been superb. I don't think... Now, we talk about gate speed and getting out of the gates. The Americans are just on a different level here. There's the bell, which is new to European horses as well. There's a lot of hullabaloo at the start. There's a lot of noise goes on at the start there, and she's gonna need to get out of those stalls quickly if she's to replicate this York effort that we're seeing on screen.
She was fantastic in the Nunthorpe. One filly I'm quite keen on the Saturday is Tuesday in the filly and mare turf. I thought she represented a little bit of value against Nashwa, having had her behind in the Oaks, where she obviously beat Emily Upjohn, who came out and franked the form. I thought Tuesday probably not at her best in that really testing ground in the Prix de l'Opera, maybe ran better than the bare form suggests. Just before we finish, final best bet for you on the Saturday card, if you would, Mark.
Yeah, the best bet for me on the Saturday card is Golden Pal in the turf sprint.
Super, that's all we've got time for to look ahead to the Saturday programme at the Breeders' Cup. Thank you so much to Mark Milligan for coming in. Thanks to you for watching, and be sure to follow the action on Sport in Lifetime Form. We've actually got Ben Linfoot out in Kentucky. He's our man gathering the big name interviews. So enjoy the build-up and best of luck with your Breeders' Cup bets.